Hello, everyone. On today's podcast episode, I'm going to talk about something that's unrelated to God in any way. So, if you're here to listen to more of me talk about God, in the Bible, this podcast, this episode is not for you. So, on this episode, I'm going to talk about a scenario. If the scenario is, if you were given, if you were, if a scientist comes to your doorstep one day, right? If a scientist comes to your doorstep one day and tells you, we will be able to, we'll help you create a human being, right? That has any special ability that you desire for a human being to have, and we'll give that human baby to you, right? And then you tell them all the special characters, all the special abilities that you want the baby to have, laser vision, the ability to read minds, blah blah blah, teleportation, or maybe the ability to be small, maybe you're a thief, you want the baby to be a thief in the future. So you say, you want the baby to have invisibility, or the ability to store things in pocket spaces. That way the baby can go around stealing for you. Or you're someone who, wants to travel the world. You want a baby that has, the ability to teleport, and also create oxygen around them, and create some sort of force field, That way, as the baby grows up, when the baby grows up, you can use the baby to travel galaxies and planets, while being enclosed in a force field, that's filled with oxygen. Or you just want a baby, you just want a baby that just has, special abilities, but you don't really care what the baby, you're not trying to control the baby. You just want to see what the baby, is capable of. And then the scientist goes and creates that baby. Because the scientist doesn't tell you, it tells you, he'll create a baby for you, right? But it doesn't tell you a hidden clause. The baby will be born with all the special abilities that you wish, right? But the baby's physical form will be so deformed and grotesque. That's the hidden clause of the agreement is that the baby will be born extremely grotesque and gross. They'll look like a monster. 3 eyes, 3 bulging eyes, one large, one small, and another large, a mouth that's bent and crooked with foul breath, the teeth covered in jagged teeth, the mouth's covered in jagged teeth with bacteria and filth all over it. The entire face is deformed and messed up, It's bent in weird areas. Just looking at the baby makes you feel like throwing up itself, The whole body of the baby is so deformed and disgusting. You just can't see it as a human being. Yet it still has arms and legs just like a human. Every part of it is human. Even the DNA is human. But the whole being is so gross and messed up that you'll be incapable of realizing this creature as a human being. And the worst part of it all is that the baby's body releases a disgusting stench that makes you throw up immediately upon smelling it. And if you stay for too long around the baby, you may even fall ill. And, the scientist goes and creates that perfect baby for you. It has all the abilities that you want, but it has that massive drawback. It's a disgusting creature from the underworld. It's a disgusting demonic creature with multiple, eyes, disgusting mouth, and, the stench coming from it just irritates your stomach immediately, causing you to throw up every time. When the scientist brings that baby to your doorstep, would you accept that baby as yours? Would you be able to accept that baby as yours? But based on the agreement, the scientist will have no choice but to put the baby in your arms. You accepted that baby, right? You have no choice but to accept it. What would you do with that baby? Would you say, hey, this baby has all the features that I want, It is a perfect baby. Ignoring the fact that just looking at the baby just irritates the living daylights out of you. That sorry, that creature is so disgusting to look at. You just, your mind just blanks out at how disgusting it is. That creature is. It doesn't even look like a human being. It doesn't look like an animal you've ever met before. It is so gross. If not for the fact that, the scientist told you it was a human baby. If not for the fact that, the scientist thought, told you it was a human baby, you'll be incapable of realizing that creature. That creature that, that they threw into your life was human. Would you be able to accept that baby as yours? You put that baby inside your house and the whole house starts smelling badly. You start throwing up all over the place. You can't even have the baby inside your house without, trying to create some sort of enclosure that'll match the smell, that'll hold the smell in. Otherwise, your entire house will be unlivable. But the upside is that baby has superpowers. The baby that has superpowers, and depending on how many superpowers you give that baby will be, would you really think that baby is perfect? It has all the superpowers you need. All the super abilities that you ever dreamed of is inside that baby. If you can raise that baby, that monster that was created in the lab, that was manufactured like an evil robotic monster, that was, manufactured like an evil robotic, creature in the lab, like a machine, like a car. It was grown in the lab like a car. Would you be able to accept that baby as yours? But thinking about the fact that at least when you grow up, when the baby grows up in 20 years, or less than that, 15 years, you'll be able to use that baby and all his abilities. You'll be able to teach that baby how to use all his abilities. Because although the baby may not know all the abilities, you were the one who created that baby. You helped create that baby. So you know exactly every ability that the baby has. Would you be able to accept that baby as yours? Would you ever think that demonic monster, that creature that looks like it's from the underworld, that looks like like the devil, sorry, the creature that looks like the devil himself, would you be able to accept a creature that looks like the devil himself as your baby? Would you be able to say, would you be able to say that baby right there, that monster that was created straight directly from the underworld, that was molded by Satan himself, that monster right there, that's my baby. I love that baby very much. Would you be able to say that? What names would you give that baby? Ugh Ugh? Or would you give it a positive name? Ugh Ugh means ugly ugly. It's short for ugly ugly. Would you give that baby evil and weird names like ugly ugly, Satan, Lucifer, Lucy, or just plain ugly, deformed, DD? DD being short for deformed. What name would you give your baby? Would you give it cruel names like ugly, deformed, chopped, disgusting? Or would you give it a positive name like angel, precious, good, great man, good man? What name would you give your child? Daisy. Would you give that ugly child a positive and good name? At least if you don't want to give the child a positive name like precious, charity, kindness, happiness, goodness, great. You can at least give your child a normal name like Alexander, Alexandra, David, Sam, Samantha. What names would you think would give that ugly child that looks like Satan himself? Would you give it a positive would you give it a positive sounding name like precious, angel, gift? Or would you give it a negative name? Disgusting, DD, gross, ugh ugh, filth. What name would you give your child growing up? Would you look up the names of all the evil demons, in mythology and give them one of those evil names? Like Apollo, Hades, Apophis, Cthulhu. You give it all the evil names, you look through all the evil names you can find, of all the evil gods of of the underworld in every religion. You find one of them and say, hey, Sin. Sin is the god of the underworld. So I'll name you Sin because you look like you came from the underworld. Would you be able to give your child that name, or would you give it a positive name? It's your child. By agreement, the scientists would never create that child without your help. You created that monster that makes you throw up. The moment you smell him, you immediately start throwing up. And if you keep throwing up, sooner or later you get so ill, you'll die. That's the creature you created. Would you be able to accept would you be able to accept that child as your own? All jokes. Would you be able to accept that child? That child that you created to perfection. The scientists crafted that child with every single ability that you want to perfection, like an evil robot, like a demented car, like a broken gadget. They created that car to perfection. Like the car was made fresh from an assembly line, from a car manufacturer's assembly line. That baby was manufactured by scientists and brought to your doorstep. And the worst part of it is, if the scientist ever finds out you threw that baby away, it's okay if you give that baby to charity, but if the scientist ever finds out you threw that baby away, because the scientist works for the government, you didn't even know that the scientist worked for the government, because you broke that agreement of having that child as yours, the scientist will come and make you pay for it. You've broken an agreement, a secret agreement with the government. And because you broke that secret agreement, you've committed a major crime. If you decide to give that baby away, you've committed a major crime. It's okay if you give the baby away, but if you throw that baby in the trash or you kill that baby, part of the agreement is, you would have committed a great crime. If you kill the baby, it's murder, because that's a human baby right there. Although it looks, decrepit and disgusting, deformed, and gross, that is still 100% human DNA right there inside that baby. So if you kill, would you be willing to kill a child that looks like Satan himself? Some people would not be able to do it. So if you're someone who decides, I will not keep this child no matter what, if this child can kill me, if being around this child is enough to kill me, if I can't even hold my stomach in, I will throw up, throw up everything in my stomach, all over my carpet, in my house, or all over the walls of my house, throw it up all over the place. My furniture will be covered in vomit. Everything will be covered in vomit. Just for being around this baby, I'm not gonna keep this baby no matter what. Would that be your mindset? If you decided you're not to keep the baby, how would you get rid of the baby? You can't kill the baby. If you kill the baby and the government ever finds out, that'll be a major crime. Although the government will never come to your house ever again, if they ever find out that baby is dead, it will be on you. So how would you do? Would you be like someone who says, this baby was not my baby whatsoever. It's the government's baby. This baby belongs to scientists. It belongs to the world. I would not be able to keep this baby, I would not keep this baby no matter how many abilities this baby has. This baby looks like Satan. Would you say, would that be one of you, would that be your reaction? This baby looks like Satan. I am not keeping this baby whatsoever. I will find a way to get rid of it no matter what. If that's your mindset, how would you get rid of it? Would you think about donating it to charity? If you already decide to throw it away, and you decide, this baby belongs to science. This is a scientific baby. This baby belongs to the world of science. I'm going to donate this baby to a scientist, to a school. And then you do what? You take your child and go to school, and you research, you research your local university, right? And then you dump the baby at the doorstep of that scientific building, early in the morning, on a weekday, early in the morning on the weekday where the professors will come in and and spot that baby immediately before the baby starts getting sick. You dump that baby right there on the front, in front of the front door of the building, saying, "This is a scientist's baby. This baby belongs to the world of science. It's not my baby. No matter how many abilities this baby has, this baby is not human. No matter what the scientists tell me, this baby is not human. It belongs to the world of science, and back to the world of science it goes." Would that be you? Would that be your reaction? Would you really throw your baby out, give the baby out to scientists? Let the scientists figure it out. Since science was the creator of this baby, science needs to take his baby back. Would that be your mindset? Or would you be like, other people who say, this is the baby of God. Everything in this world belongs to God, including this baby. Because you believe that scientists are incapable of taking care of a baby. They may perform scientific experiments on it. The moment they realize the baby has superpowers. Just the fact that the baby is gross and disgusting, they may not even think of it as a human being, but a scientific anomaly. And they accidentally kill it by performing surgeries on it. If they accidentally kill it, it's on you. You were the one who created that child. It was it was through your agreement that child was born. That child is your responsibility. Because of that, because you know that, you decided, nope, I am not giving this child to the world of science. This child belongs to God. This is God's baby. Everything in this world belongs to God. And since this child belongs to God, I will give it to the church. The church, the church is, the pastor is a servant of God, and the church is God's home. And where else should a baby be, if not at God's, presence, in the presence of God? Where else should a human baby be, if not with God himself? So thinking that God is the perfect person to raise your child, you go to church on a Sunday, put the baby in the stroller, right? You go to church with the baby, and then you dump the baby, you enter the church, right? Then during service, you put the baby, away from you, and then you pretend to go to the bathroom to go pee. But instead of going to the bathroom, do you know what you do? You immediately leave you immediately vacate the premises and run away. Let God figure out what happens to that baby. And then afterwards, right? After church service is over, everyone's about to leave. The pastor looks around and sees, there's a baby there. No wonder this whole place smells like crap. Did the baby poop himself? Why does this place stink so much? I almost threw up just, good thing, service is over because holy crap. This whole place stinks. What is going on? And then the pastor goes in and looks at the, at the crib, at the little stroller that you have of the baby, and sees a decrepit monster in there with a note from you that says, "Do not kill this monster. It's a human being. It's a human baby. I gave birth to this creature, because of God. God helped me, create this creature, and this is the child of God. This creature in here, do not kill it in any way, shape, or form. It is a child of God." Reading that word, the pastor then decides, okay, although this creature looks like it came directly from Hades himself, directly from the underworld, I'll be cautious and not kill it. It cries like a human baby. Then likely it's probably a human baby. Although it has 3 eyes, its face looks so deformed and warped, you can't even tell that it's human. But because the words, the words on the letter that you read, you wrote, the pastor decides, I'll either just call the cops or have someone, take this child in. Hopefully someone can raise this disgusting looking creature that was given to us by a random stranger. Because if we throw this child in the garbage and the child ends up being human, right? If they throw this child in the garbage bin, or they call animal control, thinking the child was some sort of demonic animal, some gross, creature, someone's pet. if they call animal control, and animal control end up killing the child, and the child is actually a human being, you know, it'll be on them. They killed a child of God. So not fearing that, the baby could actually be a human being, even though it looks completely unrecognizable to a human baby, they decided, to find a way to raise it. Would that be you? Would you donate the child to the church? Would you say this is God's baby? Since the baby was created, since everything under the earth, everything under the heaven is under God's control, and it belongs to God. This baby itself, this scientific marvel, this creature that was created directly from the underworld, it was brought up by scientists from the underworld itself. It's like they looked at, they looked at Satan, right? And they decided to create an image of Satan here on earth. They decided to create an image of Satan here on earth. And they gave that demonic creature to you. Would you say because that child, is a child of God, you give it to church? Would you give it to church? Would you donate it to the church? Would you donate it to science? Since this, saying this is a scientific baby. This baby belongs to science. I will not take any responsibility for this child whatsoever. This is not my child. My agreement was to give me a child, a healthy child with superpowers. The scientists brought me a child. Although the child is healthy and has superpowers, this thing does not look like a human child. And because it does not look like a human child, and instead looks like a science experiment, I will give this baby to science himself, to science itself. This is a scientific baby. And only scientists can figure out how this baby works, not me. I will not allow myself to die, from the stench of this baby, no matter what. This baby belongs to science. Would you say that? Or would you say, would you be the one that says, this is my baby? Although this baby looks like a robotic demon, although this baby looks like it was crafted to perfection, to resemble the devil himself, I will take this baby as mine, because this is my baby. I made an agreement with the scientists that I will raise this baby by myself. All the abilities that this baby has are the abilities that my baby has now. This is my child. Although this child was created, in a factory somewhere, like a machine, like a robot, like a broken robot, where, face all deformed, body all deformed, the smell coming from it, it's like someone just threw, garbage, endless piles of garbage into him. While making the baby, they just decided to add the genes of the most foulest smelling creatures in the world into it. And now this whole place just smells, stinks up a storm. Although this baby looks like complete garbage, I will take this baby as mine. Everything has value in this world. And this baby is my baby. All those abilities that this baby, has, these are the abilities that my baby has. I will raise this child as mine. As a child of God, if you're a Christian, as a child of God, I must treat all babies, equally. And since this baby is, no matter how ugly and disgusting this baby is, in the end, it's still a baby. In the end, it's still a human baby. I cannot throw a human baby away. I will figure out a way to take care of this baby. If I have to wear a mask, I'll wear a mask. This is my baby. This is my child. Would that be your choice? Would you say this is my baby? The baby has abilities, but the baby is ugly. The baby has ability, but the baby is deformed and disgusting to look at. Just looking at the baby, could send you to, into a panic attack. Just looking at the slightest glimpse of that baby could send your mind into, panic attack mode, because of how ugly and grotesque the baby is. But would you take that child in as yours? Right now, the child is ugly, but maybe in the future, the child could grow up to be a normal human being. Because some babies are like that. There was a news article that I read where a baby was born without a brain, right? But strangely, as the baby grew up, it actually grew a brain outside of his mother's womb, and actually started, it slowly started to develop a brain on its own. Some babies are born slightly deformed, only to grow up to be normal. So what if that child, that disgusting, that child, I won't call it disgusting anymore because it's still a child at the end of the day. That child, that gift from God, that gift from these scientists. What if that child actually grows up to be a normal human being? All the deformed features may just be, a side effect of the whole science experiment. Because it has so many abilities, it will look deformed at the very beginning, but as his body grows up, it'll slowly grow up to become that of a human being, and the stench will slowly disappear. What if that's how this whole thing works? You never know, because this happens a lot. There's a lot of people who slowly grow back to normal as they develop outside of the womb. So if you decide to keep that baby, that could be one of the upsides. In the future, the baby could grow up as a normal human being, but the equal opposite could be possible as well. The baby could get worse and worse. The stench coming from it could get worse and worse as the baby grows up, to the point where if you smell the baby once, you could die. If you smell the stench coming from that creature, you could die immediately. That could be the equal and opposite of what's happening. What choice would you make? Let me know if you decide, or this is just something you should think about. Would you really choose, to keep the baby, or would you choose to give it away? If you choose to give it away, would you give it to science? Would you give that baby back to science where it belongs, or would you give it to God? Let the children of God handle it. Let the men of God handle that baby. They may be more moral than scientists. The scientists may, seeing that the baby has magical abilities, the scientists may start, dissecting that baby like a toy, like a subhuman science experiment, like a subhuman mutant. The scientists could dissect your baby, tear it limb from limb until the baby dies, and then you'll be held responsible. You'll be held responsible by the government. So this is what you have to think about. Would you give the baby, or would you just donate the baby to a nearby orphanage? Put a letter there telling them this is a human baby, not a deformed animal, but 100% human baby. That way they don't think you just dropped an animal right directly in front of their doorstep that cries just like a human baby. So what choice would you make? Would you give this to an orphanage? You give this to the church? A child of God deserves to be with God. Or would you give this to science? A child of science belongs to science. Since science created this baby, science must be held responsible for this baby. So, that's it for today's podcast episode. I'll talk to you guys later.